Bill, wake up and smell the napalm. The zeitgeist is moving like a freight train. The Beauty and the Beast came out of the closet, boom, with an explosion. Did you watch it? $174 million in the first weekend. $400 million in box office receipts worldwide in its first weekend. The zeitgeist is rolling on this one. Now, the reason this is important is because this is Disney's first attempt to bring an explicit homosexual scene into one of their movies specifically designed for kids. And so this is huge. This is the Brave New World, and it is unfolding, and the world is ready. The world has received it. The world has stepped in and said, we are ready, baby, for this great unfolding, unraveling of sexual ethics in the 21st century, especially for my 7-year-old kid. We got to be sure the 7-year-olds get a fair amount of exposure to homosexuality. And friends, this is the biggest PG opener in history. This is the biggest PG movie opener in history at $174 million, complete with a first explicit homosexual scene. And the key thing here is it was rated PG. It's one thing to include homosexuality in an R-rated movie or a PG-13 movie. Bill, here is what makes this so insidious. This movie was a PG movie intended for the entire family. So families walked into this movie to be sure that the entire family was indoctrinated into the homosexual lifestyle at the same time. So that's what makes this movie so incredibly radical. This is revolutionary, my friends. This is how revolutions take place. You are in the middle of a cultural revolution in the United States of America. No, this is not the Cultural Revolution that Mao Zedong brought to China. This is a different kind of cultural revolution, but I'm going to say it's just about as dangerous. Wouldn't you say, Bill? Just about as dangerous as Mao's Cultural Revolution, though a bit more insidious.
Well, it's more subtle. Okay, it's not marching in the street. It's marching through the theaters.
You got it.
It's marching through the minds.
You got it. That's precisely what's going on. Friends, the PG-rated film means that families and children are watching this and they are being endeared to homosexuality. This is an all-out effort on the part of the left to homosexualize the next generation of 8-year-old and 10-year-old kids. And it's coming through the principalities and powers that dominate Hollywood today. This, my friends, is what is going on right now in our culture. One liberal commentator on high snobiety commented this way. Let me read this comment concerning Beauty and the Beast that came out last weekend. Again, friends, a opener weekend that set records in the box office. Here is one liberal commentator from high snobiety, and again, this is what he says. For the conservative ethicists out there who morally oppose the movie for its homosexual scene, let's just completely ignore the fact that this classic fairy tale has now received not one but 2 remakes from Disney without even the slightest hint of disapproval for the fact that the story's protagonist, a human, essentially develops and carries on a romantic relationship with what is basically an animal. Now, that's Beauty and the Beast he's talking about. Now, the liberal apparently seems to be okay with this interspecies breeding. Now, this is not a newbie. This is not a new thing for the liberal Hollywoodites. I think of Star Trek Into the Darkness, where you had a scene of interspecies fornication where a human is breeding not with just one, but with 2. These other species as part of Star Trek. And apparently, these guys are A-okay with it. By the way, interspecies mating has been part of Star Trek since its first episode. This is a point we've made before, is that the evolutionary worldview cannot argue against interspecies breeding and bestiality. Evolutionary worldviews simply cannot take an ethical position against interspecies breeding on the part of humans and bestiality. Now, Christians, I don't believe, can allow for this.
Well, you don't think they can?
No. Why? And a number of reasons. First reason is that
you even question whether or not they can?
Humans are made in the image of God. Humans are assigned a spouse, which happens to be a member of the opposite sex. Friends, God's law forbids it. Now, again, in the worldview of the evolutionists who put together the Star Trek stories, no question that Gene Roddenberry was about homosexuality and interspecies breeding back in the 1980s and 1990s. No question whatsoever about this. The evolutionary worldview simply cannot take any ethical position against any form of sexuality. Are you with me here? But why? Because animals can breed with whatever animals want to breed with. Because animals are not made in the image of God, and animals do not have to submit themselves to the laws of God relating to sexual sin. But Christians should not allow for this, man. We cannot allow for humans to interbreed with other species. It's just wrong, wrong, wrong. It's confusion. It's sinful. It's unnatural. It's something that even the most primitive pagans considered unnatural until you get to the 1980s.
Right.
That's something, I mean, if you asked cannibals, you interviewed them, and you said, what do you think about breeding with other species? What do you think they would say? I'm talking about just cannibals out in the middle of nowhere.
They would have they would have a distaste for that.
They would have a distaste for it. Yes, the most primitive. No, but you get into the 1980s and 1990s, whole new deal, my friends. Yes, we are in some of the most radical, most anti-biblical, the most immoral, the most unethical, the most wicked sexual environment that the world has ever known right now. What do you think, Bill? Am I exaggerating the case somewhat?
No, I don't think you are. I think what we're going to see is more and more of this being blatantly brought forward. And it's interesting that this secular commentator has pinpointed something that is the next wave. You know, Christians are always about 10 years behind the culture, and Christians are they're up in arms calling for a boycott of Disney because of the homosexual scene, and yet this guy is signaling you better pay attention because what's coming next in Disney is going to be even worse.
Yep.